Good morning, everybody, and welcome back. I'm sitting here thinking on this Monday morning how our class has gone to week 11 already. I can't believe, all of the great work that you've done, the continued research that you will be working on in the next week or two, and the writing, and the thinking and the sort of engagement you have with each other. I'm really enjoying this class. I hope you are too, and I'm excited to launch into Unit 11 this week as we put together all of that hard work from the very beginning, sort of thinking about research of the self, what we're interested in, what experiences we have to bring to bear on this class, and how we've sort of transformed those ideas into conversations that exist beyond us and with us. And so thank you so much. As we launch into Unit 11, we're going to be thinking about a couple things. One is the final project, which is called The Letter for Change, taking your research and putting it into a sort of narrative form and explaining what this issue is and to a particular discourse community, something that you thought about last week in our slide deck, adding a particular audience onto our final project. I'm going to explain the Letter for Change, and then also the other sort of component this week and the next is to sign up with a conference with me or in the Writing Research and Speech Assistance department at COD. I will talk to you about that in just a minute. In the meantime, please click on Unit 11. Again, thank you so much for the work that you've been doing. Last week you worked really hard on the discourse community slides, the collaborative reading, and then also you had your annotation, had just sort of finished your annotations. So as I continue to give you feedback on those pieces, you will start to transform those ideas into a letter. And so through this process, you'll see that we're addressing the last 3 course objectives for our class, which are to use responses from me and peers as part of the revision and editing process, to create researched print or digital text that respond to rhetorical situations being specific, particular instances of writing to an audience. And so for that, we're going to be writing to an audience to whom we've sort of investigated last week, the discourse community. We're going to respond using a letter. We're going to compose something that's addressed to a particular discourse community in order to affect change. And that's sort of the rhetorical situation. And we're going to use suitable methods of citation to continue to do that. If you would just pause this video briefly to read through our checklist here, the main pieces of this checklist are to secure a Zoom conference time with me or a Warsaw coach, and I'll explain that in a moment. I'd also like you to make sure you sweep your grades just to make sure all your work is accounted for, and if it's not, or it should be, to send me an email just to make sure everything's sort of where it needs to be, barring, of course, the annotations, which I'm still looking at. Conferences will start on Wednesday, and I'd also like those of you who didn't get a chance to do the paraphrasing activity on the Google form to practice paraphrasing. I'd be happy to help you along with paraphrasing for your research, a particular source for your research. And so to do that paraphrasing activity, simply right-click and open this tab in a new window, and you'll see that there's a paraphrasing activity. I'll add 15 points onto your SPQ score from, I think, 2 weeks ago. So for some of you, that paraphrasing activity didn't allow you to include like a paragraph length answer. And so I'm sorry for that, and hope that you take me up on this opportunity to just practice paraphrasing. I'll give you feedback on, how close you are and steer you in the right direction. Last week, I asked you to sort of preview the Letter for Change project, but I have it here below, and I'm going to talk about it in a little bit more detail. Basically, what I'd like us to do for our final project is to kind of take all of the work that you've been doing. We're not going to really be doing any extra work at this point, but to build off of the scaffolded projects in this class, to take the research questions that we've been working on and thinking about, and to put them into a letter for change, a way of communicating our idea to a chosen discourse community. So we'll put together a succinct and compelling statement on your community needs project that can be communicated to a discourse community of your choosing. And I'll be going through those discourse community slides briefly, and just to make sure everyone's sort of on the right track in terms of like how specific or how general that particular audience should be. Who will you communicate your ideas to? And then I have some examples of who that could be, but it doesn't have to be. By the close of class, you'll have a very polished letter that you should feel free to email or send to the party or group addressed in this letter. This work has the potential to be very impactful, to begin an important conversation, or add to an existing one. So I'm not actually requiring that you share the final sort of letters for change to your intended audience, but you certainly can. And if you feel compelled, I think most of you are sort of passionate about the projects you've been working on. I encourage you to do so. I have here a list of very specific things to include in the letter, which is kind of like a more impactful way, I think, of exploring your research topic and presenting your research. So the first thing you're going to do is explain what the problem or the research question is that you've been investigating this semester. You don't have to reference this class at all. You don't have to say, in my English 1102 class, I've been thinking about this topic. Rather, this can just be a sort of personal interest that you're sharing. Why is the question important to you and to your discourse community? Think about the ethos, the sort of credibility of you as a writer, and how that will shift if you say, like, I'm a student in this class versus just sort of a concerned citizen. Either is okay, but I think you'll probably have a better impact if you don't necessarily tie your project as a sort of result of classwork, but you can. What evidence do you have that supports the relevance of your research question? Discuss the range of ideas and voices that have weighed in on your research question, things perhaps already happening locally and in your research. In this section, it's really important. This is sort of the keystone of 1102, that you are integrating your research. Demonstrate that you know how to integrate secondary source material, the sources that you have from your annotations perhaps, and that you can be judicious and accurate in your directly quoting or paraphrasing other ideas in research. Don't forget that images and photographs count as evidence too. I would like you to incorporate at least 3 of the best sources from your research. I know in your annotations you submitted 5, so you're not limited to 3, but feel free to at least use 3. And this section should be about 2 to 3 pages double spaced, where you're kind of going through your research. The one thing I caution is that you avoid making this section a sort of copy and paste of your annotations. What I want to see is that you're able to connect ideas paragraph by paragraph, but that it's not necessarily distinguished or designated by source, rather that you're weaving together the research by means of ideas. I don't know if that makes sense, but trying to think about your research and how they are speaking to each other, not by saying, in this source it says this, in my next source it says this, but rather using a sort of thesis-driven argument, the sort of research question that you've been thinking about, you're going to answer and say, this is what I found. And these are the sources that are sort of talking about this idea, or similar or different to this idea. Then the section can be shorter, describing what changes will mean to you and to others and what those changes might look like. You can just sketch what some of these potential solutions or enhancements could look like in a particular community. It doesn't have to necessarily be something that you're explaining or exploring in too much depth, but I think just sort of broad brushstrokes here for that particular question. For question 4, describe what actions you hope your discourse community could take. State specifically what action and those you represent hope the official will take, and by what date if there's a deadline. That sort of depends on the particular research question, but you could say, like, by the beginning of the fall, 2023 school year, for example. If you have time and are committed, ask how you can help. For example, I'm more than willing to explore the various options in helping make your community a safer place to live. Then I do want you to include a references list. Remember that the citations for any primary, secondary sources you've incorporated in your writing are the only things that will appear in the reference list. So anything you talk about or refer to in the text of your letter should be in that reference list. And again, those citations can come from your annotations if they're accurate. And then close and sign your letter. So here's our rubric, making sure that your letter is addressed to an appropriate and strategic discourse community. Again, I'll be looking at those later this week to just make sure that you're on the right track. In addressing the prompt questions, the writer uses much evidence in supporting details. The writer has addressed all 7 components and clearly and persuasively integrates 3 or more relevant sources. The key here is that clearly and persuasively integrates them. SPQ are relevant and cited accurately, and there's a balance between your voice and the research. So mostly should be your voice. Remember to introduce cite, and then explain the quotations, so that we're not dropping in quotations or paraphrases, but that we're really using the research to extend our own conversations. I would really like you to work hard on this research portion. Again, not listing the research one source by next source by next source, but thinking clearly in terms of what is your research question, what is the sort of potential response or answer to that research question, and that's your thesis, and then using the sources to kind of provide support for that particular answer. I'd like you to have at least just a brief draft due by Wednesday. Or the very latest, sort of before we meet for your conference. So whenever you're signing up for your conference, if you have a conference with me on Wednesday, you need to have your drafts by the time I conference with you. I have 2 sample writings here. One is about growing up and thinking about diversity in District 203, so kind of a sort of more school-oriented project, while this one here is to the Active Transportation Alliance, and it's thinking about the ways in which we use transportation, public transportation, but also bicycling, cyclists, pedestrians moving about a particular area. And so this student used a lot of different images to kind of describe how that student wanted to see sort of changes in Lombard. This one was addressed to Rakita Leeks, who is Executive Director of Diversity and Inclusion, and had a sort of different, a sort of a different approach to what they would like to see changed. What kind of space can be made available for marginalized students to form connections with one another in D303? What a nice sort of specific question. How might such a space benefit these students and their mental health? And of course, you can ask rhetorical questions, or you could even just answer those questions. But maybe by the end of this paper, the student does answer those questions. And you'll see that she has sources dispersed sort of throughout the major body of this particular paper. You scroll down, you'll see, as you consider where to begin in the creation of identity-affirming counterspaces within D303, I offer a short list of goals developed by Parson and Ridley to guide educators in their program development. So here's potential solutions, and then a sort of closing with an encouragement to share the strategy with the rest of the D203 administration, connect with facilitators, and allow students to thrive amongst peers. So kind of closing and reiterating the particular goals of that research question. But of course, you're going to have questions as you start composing and drafting and thinking about your sources for this particular assignment, our final assignment. I haven't done this before, but I would love to have the opportunity to work with you on your drafts over Zoom. So what I've done is, if you click on our calendar, I've allowed you edit access of our calendar right here. I've put a whole bunch of spots on this particular calendar. I'm setting aside lots of time for this class so that I can meet with you and talk with you about your ideas and your draft, of course, to kind of give you some very specific instruction and guidance as you work on this final draft. I hope you take me up on it. I also am allowing you to think about the sort of options of WRSA coaching, which is a free service to COD students, the writing, reading, speech assistance department, and what you can do with one of those coaches if you don't want to meet with me or you can't meet with me is you can meet with one of those coaches either in person, online, or they have like an asynchronous email coaching option. And you can sign up to meet with any of these particular coaches using our COD, the link I've included there, writing, reading, speech assistance link. If you haven't made an account or have ever met with someone at WRSA before, the first time you'll have to register for an account. But then at the right, you'll kind of see the spring hours. You'll see the various options for meeting with a coach and sort of describing and discussing your drafts. Again, if you'd like to meet with me, please just sign up. Put your name on this calendar. I've set a lot of time aside for you, and I can always add more time if needed. In either case, I would like you to have either a coaching appointment or a Zoom appointment with me, and to have that done by next Wednesday. When you're Zooming, please make sure to log in 5 minutes prior to our conference time, the conference time with me. Don't Zoom me while you're driving or working out. Various things I know happen. If you're no longer to meet with able to meet with me, just give me a heads up so you can reschedule with a WRSA coach, maybe with me if there's extra openings, but I would like to just sort of reserve the times for everyone to have at least one chance to meet with me. Again, if not, please sign up with a WRSA coach and give me some kind of letter from the WRSA coach that just confirms you've met with them. Let's have a fun time this week, and I look forward to meeting with you soon. Thanks for listening.